I saw something in a nursing home basement that still haunts me to this day. Something that made me understand why certain rules exist, and why some doors should never be opened. This happened back in 2017 when I was working as a night shift CNA, that stands for Certified Nursing Assistant. I was working at an old nursing home on the east side of town called Meadowbrook Care Center. On my first day, the supervisor pulled me aside before I even put my things in my locker. Her hand gripped my forearm, firm, the kind of touch that demands attention. She pulled me away from the other staff, her eyes locked on mine. Not threatening, just tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from carrying secrets too heavy to share. She gave me one rule, just one. Never, under any circumstances, turn on the light in the storage room at the end of the basement hall. She did not explain why. She did not give me a reason. She just looked me dead in the eyes and said, if I valued my job and my safety, I must follow that rule, no questions asked. The way she said it made me knew this mistake might cost my life. Like she was warning me about something dangerous, something she had seen before. Her grip tightened for just a second. Then she let go. I do not know why, but something about the way she looked at me made my skin crawl. It was not what she said. It was what she did not say. The fear hiding behind her tired eyes. I asked her why. She just shook her head and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. That should have been my first warning sign. Looking back, I should have quit right then. Should have walked away before I learned why that rule existed. The job itself was not bad. The pay was pretty good for what it was, and I needed the money. Most of my duties were straightforward. Checking on patients every hour, helping them to the bathroom when they called, changing bedding when necessary. Making sure everyone was safe and comfortable through the long, quiet night. These were people's grandparents, people's parents. They deserved dignity and care, but there was something wrong with that building. I felt it from day one, a heaviness in the air, like the walls remembered things they should not. Every time I walked those hallways alone at night, I felt like something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The building itself was old, built sometime in the 1960s according to the plaque near the front entrance. It had that institutional look that all old medical facilities seem to have. Ugly green tile on the floors, fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly, walls painted in colors that were probably considered cheerful back then, but just looked depressing now. Faded yellow and pale blue. The whole place had this atmosphere of decay that no amount of cleaning could quite erase. You could feel the age of the building and everything. The way the floors creaked, the way the air felt heavy and stale no matter how much they ran the ventilation system. The building had this creepy basement that we used for storage, medical supplies, old equipment, extra linens, cleaning products, that sort of thing. Everything we might need during a shift, but did not want cluttering up the main floors. It was a necessary space, but nobody liked going down there. Most of the staff hated going down there. The lights flickered constantly, casting shadows that moved wrong. The air smelled like mildew and decay. And there was this feeling, like something was watching you from the dark corners. A nurse went down there for supplies and came back white as a sheet, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her clipboard. She quit the next day. Nobody would talk about what she saw. When I asked my supervisor, she changed the subject, made excuses to leave. Part of me wanted to know what she saw. The other part of me was terrified I would find out, but it was part of the job, so I went down when I had to. I always made it quick. Get in, grab what I needed, get out, and I never forgot that rule. Never turn on the light in that storage room. I did not know why, but I followed the rule. Some instinct told me that rule was not about policy. It was about survival. One night in late November, everything changed. I was working with another CNA named Vanessa. She had been at Meadowbrook for 5 years, tough, no nonsense, not easily rattled. The kind of person who had seen everything, and nothing surprised her anymore. We got along well. She did her job, kept her head down. Exactly what you want in a coworker on the night shift. It was around 2 in the morning when we got a call. A few patients on the second floor were cold. The heating system was ancient and unreliable. We needed extra blankets from the basement. Vanessa said she would come with me. She did not want me going down alone. The way she said it made my stomach tighten, like she knew something I did not. I was relieved. Going down there by myself at 2 in the morning was not something I looked forward to. Every time I went down there alone, I felt like I was being watched, like something was waiting for me to turn my back. We took the elevator down. It made terrible grinding noises as it descended, metal on metal, something that needed oil years ago. The sound echoed in the small space, making my teeth hurt. When the doors opened, the air was cold, heavy, damp. It felt wrong, colder than a basement should be. Something felt wrong the moment we stepped out. I cannot explain it. Just a feeling in my gut that we should turn around, go back upstairs, forget about the blankets. We walked toward the storage room at the end of the hall. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, too loud, each step announcing our presence to whatever might be listening. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to move independently, reaching toward us. Then Vanessa stopped suddenly. Dead stop. Her hand shot up, palm flat, military stop signal. She held up her hand without looking back at me. She said she heard something, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was afraid of being heard. I stopped and listened, straining my ears in the silence. At first I heard nothing except the distant hum of the laundry machines, the buzz of fluorescent lights. But then I heard a sound that made me freeze. Every muscle in my body locked up, choking, gasping. The terrible sound of someone struggling for air, like someone being strangled. The sound was desperate, dying, someone losing the fight for breath. It was coming from one of the locked storage rooms off the hallway. Not the main room at the end. One of the side rooms we never used. Every instinct in my body told me to run, to get back in that elevator and never come down here again. But I could not move. I was frozen, listening to someone die. Vanessa looked at me with genuine fear in her eyes, and Vanessa did not scare easily. 2 years at Meadowbrook had hardened her, but now her face was pale, her pupils dilated. Seeing that look on her face made fear hit me hard, made my legs feel weak. If Vanessa was scared, then I should be terrified. I did not know what to say. My voice came out wrong. Too high, too shaky. That sound was too clear, too human. It sounded like someone was dying in there. We kept walking, but slower now, both of us listening. The sound got louder, more desperate, more frantic. It was definitely coming from a room on our left, one of the locked rooms I had never been inside, never even looked through the window. Part of me knew we should turn around, should get help, should not open that door. But I kept walking anyway, like something was pulling me forward. The door was closed, heavy and old, solid wood painted institutional green. No light came from underneath, just darkness. But that choking continued, that awful gasping, like lungs trying to pull in air through a crushed windpipe. Then, suddenly, when we were about 10 feet from the door, the sound stopped, just cut off completely, mid-gasp, like someone flipped a switch. The silence was worse than the sound had been, that absolute quiet that comes after violence, after something terrible is finished. Every instinct in my body told me to turn around and leave, to run, to get out of that basement and never come back. But I could not. Someone might be dying in there. Someone might need help, might have seconds left. Looking back, that was the moment I should have listened to my gut, should have trusted that feeling screaming at me to run. I reached for the handle. The metal was cold under my palm, colder than it should be. Vanessa grabbed my arm hard. Her fingers dug into my skin through my scrubs, hard enough to bruise. She told me not to open it, her voice urgent, terrified, shaking. She said we should get the blankets and leave. Maybe call security, let them handle it. But I could not let it go. Someone had been choking in there seconds ago, and now silence. Either they were fine or they were dead. And if they were fine, I would hear them coughing, gasping, moving, but I heard nothing. I needed to see if someone was dying. I needed to know if I could help. That need was stronger than my fear, stronger than the voice in my head screaming at me to stop. I turned the handle slowly. It was unlocked. The door was heavy and opened with a long, low creak that echoed down the hallway. The sound crawled up my spine like fingers. It made my skin crawl. The silence inside was absolute, suffocating, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do. The room was pitch black, darker than it should be, like the darkness was thick, solid. I could not see anything, just void, just nothing. I felt around on the wall for a light switch, my hand running over cold, rough concrete, damp under my fingertips, until I found it. A standard switch. I hesitated, my fingers on the plastic, the rule echoing in my head. Never turn on the storage room light. The supervisor's tired eyes, her warning, her fear. Part of me knew I should not flip that switch. I knew that once I saw what was in that room, I could never unsee it, could never go back to not knowing. But this was not the main storage room at the end of the hall. This was different, and someone might be dying in there. So I flipped the switch. The overhead light flickered to life. That brief strobe effect before fluorescent tubes catch and hold. Harsh white light flooding the room, making me squint, making shadows jump and dance before settling. The room was full of old hospital equipment. Beds with metal frames stacked against walls, wheelchairs folded in corners like broken insects, rusty floor stands, everything covered in thick dust. Years of it, decades maybe. The air smelled stale and rotten, like something had died in here long ago and never been removed. The smell hit the back of my throat. It made me want to gag, but in the back corner, half hidden in shadow, there was a hospital bed. Not stacked, not folded, set up like someone was using it, and someone was lying in it. I could see the outline of a body under a white sheet. The sheet was dirty, stained with something dark that looked like dried blood. Brown and red patches soaked through the fabric. The body was completely still, not moving, not breathing that I could see. My heart stopped, literally stopped for one beat, then kicked back in, racing, hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. This could not be real. Why would there be a body down here? This was not a morgue. We did not keep bodies in the basement. Questions flooded my head. Had someone just died? Was this who had been choking? Or had they been dead for days? I wanted to run. Wanted to grab Vanessa and get out of there. But my legs would not move. Fear had locked them in place. Vanessa whispered that we needed to leave. Right now. Her voice was shaking, breaking. She was pulling on my arm, trying to drag me backward. Her grip desperate, but I could not move. Just stood there staring at that bed, at that body under the stained sheet, my mind racing. Was this a patient who had died? Then why were they down here? We had a morgue upstairs. Had someone been murdered? Had we just heard someone being killed? Just in that moment, the sheet moved. It was subtle, just a slight shift, like a body that had just given up its last breath. That final twitch before death. The chest area rising slightly, then falling still. But I saw it, clear as day. I saw it clearly. That small, terrible movement. And I understood. We had not heard someone calling for help. We had heard someone being executed. Someone being killed. And whatever was under that sheet had just finished dying. Or worse, had just finished killing. Looking back, that was the moment I should have run. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out and never come back. But fear froze me in place, locked my legs, made it impossible to move, made me stand there staring. Vanessa grabbed me hard, both hands on my shoulders. She yanked me backward through the doorway. We stumbled into the hallway. She slammed the door shut behind us. The sound echoed through the basement like a gunshot, making us both flinch. We did not wait. We did not think. We just ran. We ran down that hallway as fast as we could, our footsteps hammering against concrete, too loud, echoing off walls, making it sound like something was chasing us. We reached the elevator, and Vanessa slammed her hand against the button over and over, her palm hitting it so hard the plastic almost cracked. The elevator took forever. Those seconds felt like hours, like days. I kept looking back at that door, waiting for it to open, waiting for something to come out, something with that stained sheet trailing behind it. Finally, the doors opened. We threw ourselves inside. Vanessa hit the button for the first floor, pressed it repeatedly like that would make it move faster, like that would save us from whatever was down there. The doors closed. The elevator rose, that terrible grinding sound filling the small space. We stood there in silence. Both of us were shaking. Neither of us spoke until we reached the first floor. When we got upstairs, Vanessa collapsed into a chair at the nurse's station. Her legs just gave out. She caught herself on the armrests and dropped into the seat, elbows on knees, head in hands. Her whole body was trembling, shaking like she was freezing, like she would never be warm again. I stood there watching her and realized I was shaking too. My hands would not stay still. I shoved them in my pockets to hide it, to make it stop. It did not work. She told me we needed to tell someone, her voice muffled by her hands. She was not looking at me, just staring at the floor between her feet. We had to report what we saw. But who would believe us? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt, calmer than I had any right to be. The question hung in the air between us, heavy, terrible. We both knew the answer. Nobody. Nobody would believe we saw a body in the basement, a body that moved. They would think we were insane. They would think we were on drugs. They would fire us both. We decided to check the patient records. Maybe someone had died recently. Maybe their body was being held downstairs for some reason. Maybe there was a logical explanation, something that made sense. I needed it to make sense, because if there was no reason, then what we saw was real, and I was not ready to accept that. I was not ready to believe in whatever was down there in the dark. We pulled up the records on the computer. The screen, glowing blue in the dim station, scrolled through. 2 weeks back, a month, 3 months, nothing. No recent deaths, no reason for a body to be down there. I tried to justify it. Maybe it was just old equipment shaped like a body. Maybe we imagined the movement because we were scared. The human mind does crazy things when terrified, creates patterns where there are none, sees movement and shadows. But I knew what I saw. Deep down I knew. That sheet moved. That body gave up its last breath right in front of me, and no amount of logic was going to change that. Quick note before we go deeper into this nightmare. If stories like this keep you up at night in the best way possible, subscribe to the channel. It is the only way I can keep bringing these stories to you. Now, where were we? Oh yes, the basement. So, Vanessa and I made a decision that night. We would keep this between ourselves. We would not tell management. Not yet. Not until we understood what we had seen. We would investigate. We would pay attention to anything unusual, any strange deaths, any unexplained incidents. And if we found proof, real evidence that something was wrong in that basement, then we would go to someone. Then we would make them listen. But until then, we would watch. We would be careful. Because if there was something down there, something dangerous, we needed to know what it was. We needed to understand what we were dealing with, and we needed to stay alive long enough to stop it. That was where we left it that night. A pact between two scared people who had seen something impossible. Something that defied every rule of reality. Something that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. We did not know it then, but that was only the beginning. The basement had shown us what it wanted us to see, and soon it would show us much, much more. The next night I came to work. I almost did not show up. Part of me wanted to quit right then. Wanted to walk away and never look back. But I needed to know if I was losing my mind. Around 3 in the morning, I got a call from Carol at the front desk. One of the patients on the second floor had passed away. Room 212, Mrs. Elizabeth. She asked me to come help with the body preparation. Her voice was calm, professional, like this happens every week. Dread filled me the moment I heard those words. I do not know why. A cold certainty that settled in my chest and would not leave. Something told me this death was connected to what I saw in the basement. I did not want to be right. I walked to room 212 with dread filling every step, each footfall heavier than the last, my heart pounding, palms sweating. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. Mrs. Elizabeth Harris was only 46 years old. She had been admitted some months ago with severe pneumonia, but she was responding well to antibiotics. Her lungs were clearing up. The doctors said she would go home in a few days. Her death made no sense. The room was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. That stillness that only comes with death. The absence of breath, of movement, of life. Mrs. Elizabeth was lying in her bed, eyes closed, looking like she was sleeping, peaceful, but she was not breathing. I could see it immediately. The chest that did not rise or fall, the complete absence of that tiny movement that separates the living from the dead. I had prepared bodies before, many times. It was part of the job. We treat them with dignity and respect. We cover them with a clean sheet and wait for the funeral home. Simple. Routine. As I pulled the sheet up, I noticed something that made my heart almost stop, made my breath catch in my throat. She had marks on her body, not bruises, not natural discoloration. Surgical marks, fresh incisions. One on the side of her neck, another across her lower abdomen. Both stitched closed with crude surgical staples, the kind used in emergency procedures. But these were not emergency procedures. These cuts were deliberate, precise, clean. Someone had opened her up and taken something out. Someone had cut into her while she was alive, or just after death, though I could not tell. I felt like I was going to be sick. My vision swam, my legs felt weak. Those were surgical incisions. Someone had cut into her. Maybe someone had taken her organs, harvested them like she was livestock. Part of me wanted to run, wanted to pretend I did not see anything, wanted to cover her up and walk away and forget this ever happened, but I could not unsee what was right in front of me. I stood there alone in that room, staring at those marks, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a rational explanation. This was not natural. This was not a complication from pneumonia. This was murder. This was harvesting. This was evil. I covered her body and left the room. Did not tell anyone what I saw. Did not know who to trust. Anyone could be involved. Anyone could be part of this. The supervisor who warned me, the nurses, the doctors. How deep did this go? 5 days later, another patient died. Mr. Patterson, 3rd floor, room 304, only 34. He had been admitted after a car accident 2 weeks ago, broken leg, fractured ribs, concussion. But he was healing fast. Physical therapy was going well. He was supposed to go home any time. He was talking about getting back to work, back to his life. But when I walked into his room during my rounds, he was already gone. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, seeing nothing. His mouth slightly opened, like he had tried to scream but could not, like someone had cut off the sound before it could escape. When I pulled back the sheet to prepare him, I saw the same marks, fresh surgical incisions, one on his neck, 2 on his lower back near his kidneys, all stitched, closed hastily with the same crude staples I had seen on Mrs. Elizabeth. The same rushed work, the same disregard for the person they had just killed. My hands started shaking. This was not a coincidence. Someone was targeting patients, cutting them open, taking their organs, and making it look like natural death, making it look like complications, making it look like bad luck. I stood there staring at those incisions, and everything clicked into place. The basement, the body under the sheet, the choking sounds we had heard. That had not been supernatural. That had been real. Someone had been down there performing procedures, harvesting organs, and we had heard a patient dying while they worked. We had heard the last moments of someone's life being stolen from them. This was a black market organ operation, and Meadowbrook Care Center was the perfect cover. Patients with no family visiting, people recovering from accidents, people with healthy organs who would not be missed, who would not be questioned when they died unexpectedly. I knew then that I had to go back to that basement. I had to see the truth. Every part of me screamed not to, but I had to know how big this was, how many victims, how long this had been happening. 2 days later, I made my decision. I went down during my break, alone. My hands shook as I pressed the elevator button down to the basement. Shook so badly I almost could not hit it. The elevator descended with that familiar grinding sound. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the cold basement hallway. The lights flickered overhead. Some were burnt out completely. The further down the hall I walked, the darker it became. Like I was walking into the mouth of something huge, something that would swallow me whole. I walked past the room where Vanessa and I had found the first body. The door was closed. I did not open it, did not want to see what was inside. So I kept walking. I needed to know if all the basement rooms were like that one. I needed to see how big this operation really was. Every step felt heavier, like my legs were filled with concrete. Part of me knew I should turn back, should go upstairs and quit, and never come back. But I kept walking. At the very end of the hallway, I found a large metal door, different from all the others, heavier, industrial, paint peeling in long strips. And above, it was a faded sign, barely visible in the dim light. Storage room, authorized personnel only. This was it. This was the room the supervisor had warned me about on my first day. Never turn on the light in the storage room at the end of the basement hall. This was the forbidden place, the place people did not talk about, the place that made a nurse quit after one visit. Every instinct told me to turn around and forget I ever came down here. But I needed to see what they were hiding. I needed to know the truth, no matter how terrible. Looking back, that was the moment I should have listened to every survival instinct screaming at me to run. I reached for the handle, cold metal under my palm, colder than it should be. It turned down, unlocked, like it was waiting for me. The door groaned open slowly, metal scraping against concrete. The sound echoed down the empty hallway like a warning, like a scream. The room beyond was pitch black, darker than it should be, like the shadows were solid, thick. I could not see anything inside, just void, just nothing pushing back against the hallway light. I stepped through the doorway. The air hit me immediately, cold, heavy. It smelled wrong. Chemicals, decay, death. The smell burned my throat and made my eyes water. It made me want to turn and run. Every survival instinct screamed at me to leave. I felt along the wall for a light switch. My hand ran over cold, damp concrete, and then I found a switch. Old style. The kind with a round knob you have to twist instead of flip. I hesitated, my hand on the switch, every part of me screaming to stop, to leave, to run. But I had come this far. I needed to see. I needed to know. Part of me knew that once I turned on that light, once I saw what was in that room, I could never go back. I could never pretend I did not know. But I twisted the knob anyway. At first nothing happened, just a faint click deep in the walls. And then I heard it, a low electrical hum, the sound of old wiring coming to life after being dormant for years. After sleeping in the dark, the lights began to flicker, weak at first, just a dull orange glow that barely touched the darkness. But then they started to brighten, slowly, like something was feeding them power, like they were waking up after a long sleep, now getting stronger. The bulbs were old, incandescent, the kind that give off heat, and as they brightened I could feel the temperature changing, the cold air warming, the darkness pulling back like it was alive, like it did not want me to see. Then I saw what was in the room. My legs went weak, my breath caught in my throat. I could not process what I was seeing. My brain could not accept it. Bodies, dozens of them, row after row stretching back into the shadows, all laid out on gurneys and old hospital beds, all covered with white sheets, stained dark with fluids that had soaked through and dried over time. Brown and red and black stains, years of death soaked into fabric. This was not a storage room. This was a morgue, an illegal dumping ground for harvested bodies, a graveyard hidden in plain sight. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the horror in front of me. Medical equipment lined the walls, surgical tools on metal trays, IV stands with empty bags, a portable ventilator. Everything needed to keep someone alive just long enough to take what you wanted from them, to harvest everything useful, to strip them like parts from a car. The lights continued to brighten, getting warmer, the old bulbs throwing off more heat. And as the room warmed, I heard something that froze my blood, made my heart stop, breathing, slow, mechanical, labored, wet, coming from under the sheets, multiple sources, all around the room, not one, not two, dozens, all breathing in terrible unison. Bodies that should have been dead were breathing. I stood there, unable to move, unable to think, just listening to that terrible chorus of breathing. Bodies responding to the warmth, to the light, like they had been waiting in the cold darkness for someone to wake them, for someone to see. This cannot be real. This cannot be happening. But I knew it was. I could hear it, could smell it, could feel the warmth of those lights bringing them back to awareness. One of the sheets moved, just a slight shift, the figure underneath responding to the heat, to being seen. Then another sheet moved, and another. All around the room the bodies were stirring, coming back to awareness, waking from whatever nightmare they had been trapped in. I should have run, but I could not move. I was frozen, watching in horror as the sheets began to fall away, as faces emerged from the darkness. And then I heard it, a voice, weak, raspy, barely human. It whispered my name. How did it know my name? How could it speak? But it did. It said my name like it had been waiting, like it knew I would come, like it had been listening to me walk above for months, learning, waiting. The sheet fell away from the face closest to me. A woman, young, maybe 35. Her skin was gray, lifeless. Her eyes were open but clouded, unfocused. Her mouth moved, but only that terrible wheeze came out, that wet sound of lungs that should not work. Across her chest was a massive surgical incision, stapled shut, but the staples were old, rusted, and the incision was moving, rising and falling with each labored breath. Like her chest had been opened so many times the staples could barely hold anymore, like she had been harvested over and over until there was nothing left worth taking. She reached for me, her hand trembling, skeletal, her fingers grasping weakly at the air between us, begging, pleading without words. And then they all started waking up, the sheets falling away, bodies sitting up, heads turning toward me, toward the light, toward the warmth that had brought them back to this horrible awareness, back to the nightmare they could not escape. I could see them clearly now, in the growing light. Young people. A man who looked barely 20 with his abdomen carved open and stapled. A woman with tubes still in her arms and an incision across her throat. Another man with his chest opened so many times I could see the rust on the metal holding him together, holding the pieces of him in place. All of them staring at me, all breathing that same wet mechanical breath, all reaching toward me with trembling hands, all begging for help, for release, for death. I backed toward the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I could not breathe, could not think, could only stare at what I had unleashed. The young man spoke. His voice was wet, gurgling, like his lungs were full of fluid that would not drain, full of death that would not leave. He said they were awake, that they had always been awake, that they felt everything, every cut, every organ removed, every moment of agony. But they could not die. They were kept alive with machines and chemicals, kept fresh until everything useful was taken, then dumped here, still breathing, still aware, still trapped in bodies that refused to let them go. They reached for me, desperate, pleading, their mouths forming words, begging for help, for release, for someone to end the suffering, for death that would not come. But I could not help them. I could only stare in horror, could only stand there frozen while they reached and begged and suffered. Part of me wanted to help, wanted to end their suffering, but I was too scared, too weak, too selfish to do what needed to be done. And then I saw the change, the desperation turning to anger, the pleading turning to rage. They realized I was going to leave, going to abandon them like everyone else, and they could not allow it. They moved, fast, too fast for bodies in their condition, sliding off gurneys, crawling across the floor, their wounds tearing open, staples popping, dark fluid leaking from incisions. but they kept coming, kept moving, kept reaching out. Their reaching became grabbing, their pleading became screaming, voices that were barely human demanding I stay, demanding I help them, demanding I do not leave them in the dark again. I ran, threw myself through the door, slammed it shut behind me. I could hear them pounding, scratching, screaming on the other side. The sound following me down the hallway, following me into my nightmares. I ran down that hallway, did not stop, did not look back. Just ran until I reached the elevator, threw myself inside, pressed the button with shaking hands that could barely function. The doors closed, and the elevator rose. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, unable to breathe, unable to think, just shaking. When I reached the first floor, I went straight to my locker, grabbed my things, and left. I did not speak to anyone, did not explain, just walked out of Meadowbrook and never returned, never looked back. I called Vanessa that night, told her everything, every terrible detail. She was quiet, just breathing on the other end, fast, shallow. Then she said she had been having nightmares, waking up feeling like her organs were being removed, feeling the cuts even though there were no marks, feeling hands inside her body taking what they wanted,